If you're an e-commerce brand running Google Shopping ads, but whenever you search your dream type of keywords to rank first for, you're seeing competitors showing above you, or you don't even see your own ads at all, watch this video because today I'm going to break down exactly how you get ahead of competitors, really doing the 1% that no other competitors do, and that's going to be in terms of feed optimization. So today, I wanted to do a full breakdown of what optimizing a shopping feed really means, and then also the actual tutorial as to how to implement everything. So let's first talk about what you should really be looking out for when you are doing some competitor research, and then also what successful shopping ads actually look like. So what we did here was we just searched up eye health supplements. Supplements are just a great example to look at, but there's a few things that you really want to keep an eye on which stand out. Number one is going to be the product image, because that's really the most dominating part of the listing. If you look, obviously it's going to be the product image, the title, and then obviously price is going to play a factor, and reviews. But in terms of what's the lowest hanging fruit, it's going to be your product images. And I want you to take a look, really look at what stands out, right? The only one that I would say is a little bit polarizing is the fact that there's kind of bundles and a person actually holding it. But all of these other brands, they're running with one or two kind of supplements with a white background, super generic, no polarization. And what I've seen the most success with for e-commerce brands is actually having a polarizing shopping ad listing. So I actually want you to go to your website or your product page, look through the different products that you have, the product images of those products, and look at which one has not a white background, but a different type of background. And that's exactly what I want you to use for your actual shopping ads. Super easy to implement. You can do it directly in Merchant Center by just switching which product image you're using, or we can use a feed optimization tool, which I'll walk you through and show you how to do it. Better for higher SKU stores and where you really just want to get away from tedious tasks and manually entering different kind of feed rules. That's the first thing, is the product image. The next thing that we want to look at is make sure our title is optimized, because the way that shopping ads work, you don't actually have keywords. Your targeting is done through your product listing. And the way that Google is able to understand who to target is by the keywords being in the product title. So if you put it earlier in the title, the actual keyword that you want to target, for example, in this case, we have eye health supplements. If you front load that at the start of the title, that's going to make it easier for Google to rank you and understand that search is relevant to your actual product, and it's going to rank you higher. And you're also going to be rewarded with lower CPCs because, again, you're making Google's job easier of showing a relevant listing. So that's the first thing that we want to do. Again, some examples of a worse product title would be something like this, right? Because you have 150 characters to play with. At the same time, you don't want to stuff it with a bunch of nonsense, but you want to make sure what you're actually saying resonates with what the person is looking for. So in this case, again, we have eye health supplements. We want to talk about how many capsules are included. We want to talk about the actual brand. Maybe it's recognizable. Any key features, again, that you see other competitors aren't mentioning, or you know that customers are actually asking about or care about, let's say in your support messages or just from experience, make sure that's actually mentioned in the product title. Okay, so this would be a worse example, of course, and then an even worse example here would be like grapeseed extract. You see, like that's a huge problem because, again, there's nothing related to the actual search that I made, at least the product type, the number of capsules, the actual brand. Thorne is well known. I actually use them myself. But look through the different examples and see really what I want you to think about is how you can make a polarizing listing. And you can even write out some product title ideas. That's what I like to do. And then we can actually implement them and test them out on Google Shopping. And in essence, in a very basic level, that's going to be feed optimization. It's making sure your attributes are really crawlable and accurate and appealing, because again, like I said, Google is going to reward you when it's easier for it to match a search to your actual products. And also you're going to have lower CPCs, right? Because your quality scores are going to go up. Now, those are the two simplest attributes. There's some other attributes I want to go over as well, which are going to be product types. On the back end, if you're using Shopify, you can map product types there, and that can get pushed to Merchant Center. Or again, I'll show you a different way you can do it. Also, your product identifiers, if you have GTINs are Google's way of basically saying a UPC code. So if you have barcodes for your product, make sure that's added, because it's another way it can identify your actual products. And then from an ad standpoint, we actually use custom labels as well, because if you have hundreds of SKUs, for example, you don't want to just push them all into the exact same campaign or asset group if you're using Performance Max. you actually want to be able to categorize by price, by margins, by bestsellers. There's different ways to categorize based on obviously your brand. So that's where we want to also use a tool to be able to do that. And just having all of these 5 or 6 items implemented, that's going to get you ahead of 99% of advertisers and really allow you to get better results from your shopping ads. Because again, if you have lower CPCs and your results right now are 2.5, 3x ROAS, all of a sudden, if you have lower CPCs for the same traffic, you're going to see a 4x. And that might be the difference between having to be stable with spend and actually being able to scale your budget and pushing to that next level. So now that we covered why feed optimization is actually important, I wanted to actually jump into a screen share and show you how you can really manipulate and change the different product titles or attributes that you have. There's really like no tutorials like this on YouTube because everybody pretty much gatekeeps it or just doesn't know or doesn't want to share it. Anyway, I wanted to show you the actual breakdown of how you optimize your feed step by step, really how you would change these attributes. What you're looking at here, because it doesn't look like Merchant Center, it's called Data Feed Watch. It's the feed optimization tool I like to use. Again, not affiliated with them, but it makes it really, really easy to edit your product titles, descriptions, different attributes like I mentioned, without having to actually change anything on your Shopify site. So again, you can keep the simple titles that you have on your website, but what this tool allows you to do is make sure that what you're actually pushing to ads is actually optimized, right? For a Google perspective, it can be keyword loaded, whereas something like that you wouldn't want to show on your site. Okay, so here I just wanted to dive into an example. You can create a Data Feed Watch account and try to follow along with me. These steps are pretty simple. Typically, you just have to choose an integration partner, and there's a Data Feed Watch app that you can install in Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento, whichever partner that you use. And then when you're linked to that, it just needs your like admin backend URL. It syncs the data from there and then puts all the products pretty much into a feed here. And then what you can do is you can copy the feed URL and then you set it up within Merchant Center. So that's how it actually pulls the data, is from Data Feed Watch. So any updates you make in the future in Data Feed Watch using the feed you have here is going to automatically sync to Merchant Center and then be pushed to your shopping ads. Instead of us just using a Shopify imported product feed where, like you saw, your titles might be a mess, you don't have product types, you don't have product identifiers, your descriptions aren't there. That's where we want to use a tool like this to make sure all of those gaps are solved so that shopping ads are actually successful and optimized. Okay, so let's dive right in. So it's going to take you afterwards to actually create a channel. You can do Google Shopping. In this case, I just did Bing. This is just a demo, but let's dive right in. I wanted to show you. Okay, so you're going to see you have different types of attributes here. There's certain attributes that are required for Merchant Center, really just so Google can actually crawl your product. And that's going to be things like your title, your product ID, and it'll typically be able to map it correctly on its own. So the first optimization that I would always want to make is with your titles. So in this tool, it's very, very easy. You can add pretty much different options here. So the way that we do that is if we hover over it, you can enter text and you can say XYZ, right? If there's like a certain thing you want to say or like a CTA, you can do that at the end of your titles and add it here. You can also do something like your product types, right? Because again, if you have that mapped in Shopify, that attribute, you can pull that into here as well. Or if you have different variants and you want to show certain types of variants in your actual titles, you can do that as well. Okay, and all of that stuff can be changed here. You can do it for certain types of products. You can split test. Again, there's not as much data in here in terms of split testing, so you can't really conclude through here, but that's something you can do as well. And you can really just preview and see really the different things that are pushed. Okay, so here, like one of the variant titles I have is like with, without, not something I just want to include right now. You can see I added the product type. So again, like if I wanted to squeeze that into a part of the title, then I could do that just because of that attribute. And then obviously that would dynamically shift, right? Because not every product I have hypothetically is a pool heater. There might be, I don't know, outdoor TVs because it's like an outdoor themed Shopify store. So that product type is going to dynamically switch with the type of product that's being pushed based on, again, how it's mapped on the back end. Okay, and there's different things that you want to do. The best example that I can give you is Data Feed Watch actually has like a title notation example. I'll show that on the screen. So as you can see, for different categories, there's different recommendations. Again, I like to kind of use this as a guide. Obviously, each brand is different and you want to push certain attributes later or at the start. Typically speaking, we would want to start with the keywords, and I would put the brand later because, again, the earlier that you put in the actual keywords you want to target in your product titles, the higher that you're actually going to be able to rank and easier for Google to crawl you. So like I mentioned earlier. So here we have the example of consumables like I was going over before. We can do brand. I would put brand later. I would want to put the actual what we want to target, product type, and different attributes. So weight's a good one. Also the count, I think typically people want to see the capsules just to know how many are included. And then again, if you have different variants showing in your shopping ad, so like you have product variable with one kind of container and then the other ones with 2 or 3 or a bundle of 6, for example, we all want to show those in different listings and then also have different capsule counts in that. So let's dive back into Data Feed Watch and actually do that example that we see here. Okay, so super simple. If I do here, we can say, again, for your own brand, this is going to be completely different, but we can say supplement, eye health supplement. And we can do like a dash here, put this to the start, and then we'll pretend we have like the actual product type from Shopify, and it's going to say the actual brand name, maybe the product type. And then we can also add something like custom capsules if we wanted to here as well. But as you can see, that's going to make for a lot more of an appealing listing, right? Because if we contain all of those different attributes, and again, if you have this mapped on your Shopify backend, again, I just don't have it for this store because this is a completely different niche, but you can actually map that to make sure it dynamically pulls it. So if you have a certain product that has 60 capsules, another one that has less, you can actually categorize that correctly, okay? The next attribute I want to move towards is making sure that your descriptions are actually being pulled. Sometimes what will happen with Shopify or WooCommerce, any of those providers, it can actually not map or pull the description correctly, causing you to have like a completely empty description field in Google Merchant Center. Your product will still serve, but the problem is going to be the fact that, again, there's less data for Google to pull in terms of ranking you because the data it gets about actually being able to rank you is also pulled from that description, even though like we were looking in those examples, you don't actually see the descriptions on that front end. It's more so a back end thing. So you want to make sure, again, your descriptions are SEO optimized and you're pushing those towards your actual shopping listings. Okay, so here we're just making sure the description field is here. Make sure yours is mapped as well. Link is going to be okay. And to go over my point from before about image links, how you can actually get a lifestyle type of image showing in your shopping ads and dynamically switching that, all you would need to do is make sure that your additional image is mapped on the back end, or you actually have that additional image in your Shopify. So let's say you have on your actual product listing on your site, you have a white background image and then you have a lifestyle image. This is where we can switch to additional image link 1. Right, so it's going to be additional image link, and then we can say only for certain products. So if you only want to try this for a few products, you can do that, or you can do it for certain categories, for example. So that's a different way to do it as well, but obviously you have to have it mapped on your back end. So that's something I typically play around with, and I'll tell clients, hey, like we should definitely test out the image links for XYZ products since that's what we want to push priority for, and then how to map that on the back end as well. Another big one as well is price. If we go back to the example here, the price is actually in pounds, which is not something I want to see or care about. And I guarantee you that if I click on this ad, it's going to actually take us to a product listing with the price in pounds, which automatically is going to knock off a US user. Same thing if you're a US advertiser advertising to Canada, we should be able to see a Canadian price here. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's why you also need designated feeds per country, where there's obviously a different type of currency, right? So like in US, you need a designated one. So if we go back to Data Feed Watch, you just want to make sure that your actual suffix is correct, and you can manually add like a USD suffix to the price just to make sure it's pushed correctly. Or again, if it's Canadian, for example, you can do CAD to make sure it's correct. And I would do that again in a separate feed. So we would pretty much duplicate what we have here, and then it would be how it says Bing US here, we would have Bing Canada. I made a tutorial on this a few weeks ago, so definitely check that out, and I explain how to actually do that step by step. And that's also going to fix any issues if you have mismatched product price, because what's going to happen again is Google's crawling your site and it's pulling a US price for a Canadian customer for a Canadian country. So it's going to disapprove you in that country as well. So that's something you want to be conscious of. Okay, availability standard, brand is standard. Again, if you have that mapped on your back end, that's going to push here. And then product identifiers as well. So sometimes what we can do, if you don't have it mapped, is we can actually extract from, and we can pretty much create a spreadsheet. So we can have in column 1, we can have IDs, and the second one we can have GTIN. And that way we pretty much upload the spreadsheet as a supplemental feed, which means Google now understands where to pull all of the product identifiers from, and then also which products to actually map it to. And that's like a really quick way to fix it if you don't want to go through your entire backend and just manually go through and do that in Shopify. And then other attributes as well. Again, if you're like a clothing brand, definitely the color is going to be something you want to mention, even though like it's in the product image. Again, an important attribute to look over as well. Product types here as well, and then different additional image links, making sure that those are actually pulled. So when somebody's in the shopping tab, actually seeing that there's different additional image links, even though we only saw one image in those shopping listings. And then here you can do custom labels as well. So I like to play around with this in different ways. In this case, it made the most sense by brands, but this is where when you actually go into your shopping ads, and if you go to asset groups and then listing groups, or in a standard shopping campaign, it'll be ad group and then listing group. You can actually categorize when you click all products by different ways, and there's a way to select custom label. Just again, the problem is if you don't have a custom label mapped, it's going to be empty. And again, if you're just pushing all products, that goes back to what I mentioned at the start, is there's no clear segmentation for the algorithm or way for it to actually understand, okay, which products are being pushed in terms of priority, which ones should we focus on, which ones can it not target because you know those don't work, excluding things like accessories as well. This is a good way to do that. So what we did here, again, we went by brands because, again, we're reselling different brands here in the example. So there's different ones here we can go through, but there's different ways you can set this up. Like you can do one by price. So you can do add static value over, like you can say over $999 plus, only if price is greater than here. And that's pretty much just going to push any product that's over $999 to this actual listing. Everything else gets excluded. And you can use that same type of principle to categorize by margin. If you know certain groups of products are higher margin, you can have a 0 to 20% bucket, 20 to 40%, and then 40 to 60. And then you push most of your budget and more aggressively with your ROAS targets to those actual products that have 40 to 60% margins, rather than those that are actually at 20%, where you would pretty much need to get 2 or 3 times the actual ROAS to be at the same level of profitability. So this is a really, really good way to do that with certain conditions. Easy way to do it is on titles, on brands. There's different ways that you can categorize it. Another really good feature of this tool is the fact that you can use product types here, and it automatically assigns it to certain products. So you don't have to manually go through and do it. Of course you can based on certain conditions, but it just has to have that data to pull from somewhere. And then based on product types that you have on the back end, it knows to push it based on Google's product taxonomy. So what that is basically is Google has a huge list of different product types that are valid. And again, this helps with ranking, right? Because here you can see we have exactly pool heaters pushed for pool heat pumps. Whereas if we didn't have that, Google doesn't have that attribute to leverage and confirm that the search is actually relevant to what we're offering. So super useful in that end. And we have that for all of the different products that we have. And then it might have missing categories where you'll manually just have to go in and actually assign a category. But that's something to keep in mind, is it can auto categorize it. Whereas if we go to my screenshot here, and I can show you again, like you have product types right here, but imagine in Merchant Center, you just manually have to go through and add it for like 100 products, right? Like that would be super tedious and not a good use of time. Rather, again, with this tool, you can bulk add it to certain categories that are relevant. That wraps up this video. If you actually want me to go in and optimize your feed, or literally just give you a consultation on how to get it fixed, how to actually set up data feed watch, book a call with me. My link is down in the description. Would be happy to help you. If you have any other questions about feed optimization or want me to dive into something more specifically in terms of the data feed watch side, Google Merchant Center side, or how something works, let me know down in the comments. I'll be happy to help you out. I'll see you in the next one.